The golden rays of the rising sun painted the Sao Paulo skyline in hues of amber and rose as Matthias Alves stirred from his slumber. At 35, Matthias was the epitome of success in the bustling Brazilian metropolis, a self-made millionaire with a reputation for ruthlessness in business and an insatiable appetite for the finer things in life. As he stretched his arms, feeling the silky caress of Egyptian cotton sheets against his skin, a smug smile played across his chiseled features. Another day to add to his fortune, another opportunity to indulge in the pleasures that only money could buy. Matthias swung his legs over the edge of his king-size bed, his bare feet sinking into the plush carpet that covered the floor of his penthouse bedroom. With a languid grace, he padded over to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city he considered his personal playground. Far below, the streets were beginning to buzz with the frenetic energy of early-morning commuters, people Matthias regarded as mere cogs in his money-making machine. He watched them scurry about like ants, a sense of superiority washing over him. These were the masses, the ordinary folk who could only dream of the lifestyle he led. Another day in paradise, he murmured to himself, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, drawing Matthias to his state-of-the-art kitchen. His personal chef, a culinary artist he'd poached from a Michelin-starred restaurant, greeted him with a deferential nod. "Good morning, Mr. Alves. Your breakfast will be ready momentarily." Matthias barely acknowledged the man, his attention already on the sleek tablet resting on the marble countertop. He scrolled through his schedule for the day, meetings with investors, negotiations for a multi-million-dollar deal, perhaps lunch at that exclusive new restaurant everyone was talking about. As he sipped his perfectly prepared espresso, Matthias mentally rehearsed the persona he'd cultivated over years of climbing the corporate ladder. It was a mask of confidence bordering on arrogance, a shield that protected him from the vulnerabilities he'd left behind in his humble beginnings. The chef placed a plate of artfully arranged fresh fruit and organic, gluten-free toast before him. Matthias picked at it absently, his mind already racing with strategies and power plays for the day ahead. His phone buzzed a message from his latest conquest, a model he'd met at a charity gala last week. She was eager to see him again. Matthias smirked, knowing he'd probably tire of her soon, just as he had with countless others before her. Relationships in his world were transactional, a game where the one with the most to offer held all the power. As he dressed in a bespoke suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary, Matthias caught his reflection in the full-length mirror. He saw a man at the top of his game, successful, attractive, and untouchable. Little did he know that fate had other plans for him, that his carefully constructed world was about to be turned upside down by an encounter that would challenge everything he thought he knew about wealth, worth, and the human heart. Straightening his silk tie, Matthias Alves stepped out of his penthouse, ready to face another day as the king of his self-made empire. The elevator descended, carrying him down from his lofty perch to the world below, a world he was certain he had all figured out. If only he knew how wrong he was. The shrill ring of Matthias's phone cut through the ambient noise of his chauffeur-driven Bentley. A glance at the screen brought a rare smile to his face. It was Ricardo, his best friend since college, and now a business partner in several ventures. "Matthias, my friend. Ready for another day of making it rain?" Ricardo's animated voice filled the car's interior. Chuckling, Matthias replied, "Always, my dear Ricardo. What's on the agenda today? Any exciting new prospects?" There was a pause, followed by a mischievous tone in Ricardo's voice. "Actually, I have a challenge for you." Matthias's eyebrow arched in intrigue. Challenges were rare in his life these days. He'd conquered nearly everything he set his sights on. A challenge? Now you have my full attention. Remember our conversation about how money can buy anything? Well, I want to see if you can prove it. Leaning back in the supple leather seat, Matthias felt a surge of confidence. "Of course I can. What did you have in mind?" "I want you to get married for a day." There was a beat of silence as Matthias processed the words. "Married for a day? Is that all? I can easily arrange a model or actress." No, Ricardo interrupted. "It wouldn't be a challenge if it were that easy. I want you to marry someone you wouldn't normally look at twice on the street." Matthias felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" "An obese woman," Ricardo replied without hesitation. I want to see if you're capable of spending an entire day married to a woman who's far from your usual standards." Matthias nearly choked on his morning espresso. "You must be joking." "I'm dead serious," said Ricardo. "If you succeed, I'll donate 1 million reais to a charity of your choice. If you can't do it, you make the donation." Silence fell over the car as Matthias contemplated the proposition. On one hand, the idea repulsed him. On the other, he never backed down from a challenge, especially when money was involved. "Fine," he said finally. "I accept. But on one condition: you arrange everything, the woman, the papers, all of it. I don't want to be involved any more than necessary in this madness." Ricardo's laughter echoed through the phone. "Deal. Prepare yourself, my friend. Tomorrow you'll have a day quite different from your usual." As Matthias ended the call, he shook his head, wondering what on earth he'd gotten himself into. But he quickly pushed those thoughts aside. It was just one day, after all. How bad could it be? The following morning dawned overcast, as if the sky itself was hesitant about what was about to transpire. Matthias woke earlier than usual, a mixture of anxiety and irritation bubbling in his stomach. He dressed meticulously, choosing a bespoke Italian suit. If he was going to endure this ordeal, he would at least be impeccably dressed. At 9 o'clock sharp, the doorbell of his apartment rang. Matthias took a deep breath before answering. Ricardo stood there, a wide grin on his face, accompanied by a woman who made the millionaire's heart sink. She was exactly as Ricardo had described Obese, weighing at least 150 kilograms, dressed in simple, unflattering clothes. Her brown hair was tied in an awkward bun, and she looked as uncomfortable as Matthias felt. "Matthias, this is Luisa," Ricardo introduced, still smiling. "Your wife for a day." Luisa looked timidly at Matthias, a slight blush tinging her chubby cheeks. "Hello," she said softly. Matthias forced a smile, extending his hand. "Pleasure to meet you, Luisa." Ricardo handed Matthias a folder with the necessary documents for the one-day marriage, a legal loophole he had managed to arrange. "All set. You're officially married for the next 24 hours. Have fun." Over the wave and a wink, Ricardo was gone, leaving Matthias and Luisa alone in the corridor. An awkward silence settled between them. "Well," Matthias said finally, "I suppose we should go inside." Luisa nodded, following him into the apartment. Her eyes widened as she took in the luxury of the place. "Wow," she murmured. "It's beautiful here." Matthias shrugged, not giving it much importance. To him this was just the basics. "Thank you," he said curtly. "So what would you like to do today?" Luisa seemed surprised by the question. I didn't expect you to ask me that." The millionaire sighed internally. This was going to be more difficult than he had imagined. "Well," Luisa said, her voice soft but with an undercurrent of determination, "there is a place I've always wanted to visit. The Sao Paulo Museum of Art. Would you like to go there with me?" Matthias hesitated. Museums weren't exactly his favorite pastime, but it was better than being trapped in the apartment all day. Sure, why not? Luisa's face lit up with a genuine smile, and for a moment Matthias caught himself thinking she had a certain charm when she smiled like that. As they left the building, Matthias noticed the curious and even disdainful looks people were casting at the unlikely couple. He felt a pang of shame, but to his surprise, also a spark of indignation at the looks directed at Luisa. In the car, Matthias expected the awkward silence to continue, but to his surprise, Luisa began talking about art. Her eyes sparkled as she described her favorite paintings and the artists she admired. Matthias found himself listening with genuine interest, impressed by her knowledge. Upon arriving at MASP, Luisa seemed like a child in a candy store. She guided Matthias through the galleries, explaining each work with passion and eloquence. The millionaire was surprised to find himself actually enjoying the visit. "You really know a lot about art," he commented as they observed a Portinari canvas. Luisa blushed slightly. "Thank you. I studied art history in college. It's always been my passion." Matthias frowned. "And you don't work in the field?" "It's complicated," Luisa said, her eyes clouding. "My family, well, they have other expectations for me." Before Matthias could inquire further, Luisa changed the subject. pointing to another work. The millionaire let it slide, but he was intrigued. There was more to this story than he knew. After the museum, they had lunch at a nearby restaurant. Matthias suggested a chic place, but Louisa preferred a simple diner. Initially reluctant, the millionaire ended up surprised by the flavor of the home-cooked food. During lunch, they talked more. Matthias discovered that Louisa volunteered at an animal shelter and loved to read. She had an intelligent sense of humor and a contagious laugh. Gradually, the millionaire found himself relaxing and even enjoying himself. In the afternoon, at Louisa's suggestion, they visited a nearby park. Walking among the trees, Matthias was surprised to realize how light and carefree he felt, something rare in his busy business life. You know, Louisa said, watching a group of children playing, sometimes I think people forget to appreciate the simple things in life. Matthias looked at her, intrigued. What do you mean? She smiled, her eyes shining. Look around us. The green of the trees, the sound of children's laughter, the smell of grass, all of this is free. And yet how many people stop to really appreciate it? The millionaire fell silent, reflecting on her words. He couldn't deny there was a profound truth there. As the day progressed, Matthias found himself increasingly intrigued by Louisa. There was a depth to her that he hadn't expected, an intelligence and sensitivity that went far beyond physical appearance. As evening fell, and they returned to Matthias's apartment, the millionaire was surprised to realize he didn't want the day to end. So he said, a bit awkwardly, I guess our one-day marriage is coming to an end. Louisa smiled, a little sadly. Yes, I suppose so. It was. It was a very special day, Matthias. Thank you. Impulsively, Matthias took her hand. Louisa, I'd like to see you again. Not as part of a challenge or anything, but because I really enjoyed spending the day with you. Louisa's eyes widened in surprise, but soon a smile illuminated her face. I'd like that too, Matthias. At that moment, something changed between them, a silent understanding, a connection that went beyond appearances or social conventions. Before Louisa could leave, Matthias surprised her with an invitation. Would you like to? He hesitated for a moment, but the sparkle in her eyes betrayed her curiosity. Are you sure? I mean, we've only known each other for a day, and... Matthias smiled, a genuine gesture that surprised even himself. I'm sure. Besides, technically we're still married for a few more hours, aren't we? With a light laugh, Louisa agreed. Okay, let's go. As they left the luxurious apartment and headed for Matthias's car, an Italian sports car that made Louisa's eyes widen, he couldn't help but wonder, what am I doing? This isn't like me at all. And yet, why does it feel so right? Louisa settled into the passenger seat, a mix of excitement and nervousness on her face. So where are we going? She asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. Matthias started the engine, a mischievous smile playing on his lips. You'll see. Let's just say it's a place that might change everything. As they drove off into the night, neither of them could have imagined the profound impact this impromptu decision would have on their lives. The challenge that had started as a joke was about to take a turn that would shake the foundations of Matthias's world. The weeks that followed their unconventional first day together were a whirlwind of discovery for Matthias. Each moment spent with Louisa seemed to chip away at the carefully constructed facade he had built over the years. Their second date was at a small, family-owned bookstore that Louisa adored. As they wandered through the cramped aisles, fingers brushing against worn spines of books, Matthias found himself captivated by Louisa's passionate descriptions of her favorite authors and stories. Her eyes lit up with a fervor he had never seen before, not in the boardrooms where millions were at stake, nor in the exclusive clubs where the elite congregated. You know, Louisa said, cradling a weathered copy of 100 Years of Solitude, books are like people. Some are flashy and attention-grabbing on the outside, but hollow within. Others might seem plain, but they hold entire universes inside. Matthias pondered her words, a strange feeling stirring in his chest. And which am I, Louisa, flashy or plain? She looked at him, her gaze penetrating. I think you're a rare addition, Matthias. Glossy cover, yes, but with depths you're only beginning to explore. Her words stayed with him long after they parted that day. As days turned into weeks, Matthias found himself cancelling business meetings and rescheduling conference calls to spend more time with Luisa. They explored hidden corners of Sao Paulo he never knew existed: quaint cafes, community gardens, local art galleries. But each outing was a revelation, showing him a side of the city and himself he had never seen before. One sunny afternoon, as they volunteered at the animal shelter where Luisa worked, Matthias found himself covered in dog fur and mud, laughing more freely than he had in years. A scruffy mutt had taken a liking to him, refusing to leave his side. "I think he likes you," Luisa giggled, her hair escaping its bun in wispy tendrils. Matthias scratched behind the dog's ears, surprised by the warmth spreading through him. "I've never had a pet before. Always thought they were too messy, too much responsibility." Luisa knelt beside him, her eyes soft. Sometimes the things that seem like the biggest inconveniences bring the most joy. You just have to be willing to embrace the mess. As he looked at her, smudges of dirt on her cheek and that radiant smile on her face, Matthias realized he was already embracing the beautiful mess that was falling for Luisa. However, their budding relationship wasn't without its challenges. Matthias's world and Luisa's were vastly different, and the clash of these realities often led to tense moments. At a charity gala Matthias was obligated to attend, Luisa felt out of place among the glittering crowd. She overheard snippets of conversation, veiled insults about her appearance, wondering aloud what someone like Matthias saw in her. Later that night, as they stood on Matthias's balcony overlooking the city, Luisa's voice was quiet but firm. "I don't belong in your world, Matthias." He turned to her, alarmed. "What do you mean?" The stares, the whispers. "I'm not blind, Matthias. I know what they think of me, of us." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Maybe they're right. What could you possibly see in someone like me?" Matthias felt a surge of anger at the shallow people at the gala, at the society that valued appearance over substance, but most of all at himself for ever being part of that world. He took Luisa's hands in his voice rough with emotion. "What do I see in you? I see kindness that doesn't expect anything in return. I see passion that ignites everything it touches. I see wisdom that comes from truly living, not just existing." He cupped her face gently. "Luisa, you've shown me a world beyond profit margins and stock prices. A world where the richest experiences cost nothing at all." Luisa leaned into his touch, a tear escaping down her cheek. "But your life, your career, mean nothing if I can't share them with someone who makes me want to be better," Matthias finished. "You make me want to be better, Luisa." As they stood there, the city lights twinkling below them, Matthias realized that the challenge that had brought Luisa into his life was transforming him in ways he never could have imagined. Yet, even as their relationship deepened, Matthias couldn't shake the feeling that Luisa was holding something back. Sometimes he'd catch a shadow passing over her face, a moment of hesitation before she spoke about her past or her family. It was as if there was a part of herself she kept locked away, out of his reach. One evening, as they walked hand in hand along the Pinheiros River, Matthias decided to broach the subject. "Luisa," he began carefully, "I feel like there's something you're not telling me about your family." She tensed beside him, her steps faltering. "Why do you say that?" Matthias sighed. "You always change the subject when I mention meeting them. And sometimes when you think I'm not looking, you seem so sad, like you're carrying a great weight." Luisa was silent for a long moment, her eyes fixed on a distant point. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's a lot you don't know about me, Matthias. About my family and, I'm afraid." Matthias's heart raced. "Afraid of what?" She turned to him, her eyes brimming with a mixture of fear and something else, hope perhaps. "Afraid that when you know everything, it will change things between us." Matthias squeezed her hand reassuringly. "You can tell me anything, Luisa. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." Luisa took a deep breath, seeming to gather her courage. "Okay," she said softly, "but not here. Let's go somewhere private. There's a story I need to tell you, a truth that might change everything." As they turned to head back to Matthias's apartment, the weight of unspoken words hung between them. Matthias couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the precipice of something monumental, a revelation that would alter the course of their relationship forever. What truth could Luisa be hiding? And more importantly, would their love be strong enough to withstand it? The Alves' mansion loomed before them, a sprawling testament to generational wealth and privilege. Matthias felt an unfamiliar nervousness as he guided the car up the winding driveway, Louisa fidgeting beside him. "My parents," Matthias explained, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "They live in this mansion on the outskirts of the city. They're quite, let's say they're rather traditional and somewhat conservative." Louisa nodded, a little nervous. "Do you think they'll accept me?" Matthias hesitated for a moment. "To be honest, I don't know. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that I want you to meet them." As they approached the grand entrance, a middle-aged housekeeper greeted them, unable to hide her surprise at seeing Matthias's companion. "Your parents are in the living room, Mr. Matthias," she informed, casting furtive glances at Louisa. Entering the richly decorated living room, Matthias's parents, Carlos and Helena Alves, stood up, clearly shocked at the sight of their son, accompanied by an obese woman. "Matthias," Helena exclaimed, her voice betraying a mixture of surprise and disapproval. "We didn't know you were coming, and with company." Carlos, a man of severe features, merely stared at Louisa with an unreadable expression. Matthias, sensing the tension in the air, decided to take the initiative. "Mother, father, this is Louisa. We met recently and I wanted you to meet her." Louisa, visibly uncomfortable, forced a smile and extended her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. and Mrs. Alves." Helena shook Louisa's hand briefly, while Carlos merely nodded his head. "So Louisa," Helena began, her tone falsely sweet, "what do you do for a living?" Before Louisa could respond, Matthias intervened. "Louisa has a degree in art history and works as a volunteer at an animal shelter. She has incredible knowledge about art, you know." Matthias's parents exchanged surprised looks, clearly not expecting to hear this. The conversation that followed was tense and punctuated by uncomfortable silences. Helena asked questions that bordered on rudeness, while Carlos remained silent, observing Louisa with a calculating look. As the evening progressed, Matthias felt increasingly uncomfortable with the treatment his parents were dispensing to Louisa. He had never questioned his family's values before, but now, seeing the barely disguised contempt in their eyes, something inside him revolted. It was when Helena made a particularly malicious comment about Louisa's weight that Matthias finally exploded. "Enough," he shouted, surprising everyone in the room. "I won't sit here and listen to you treat Louisa this way. She's an incredible person, intelligent and kind. The fact that you can't see beyond her appearance says more about you than it does about her." A stunned silence fell over the room. Louisa looked at Matthias with a mixture of surprise and gratitude, while his parents seemed to have been struck by lightning. "Let's go," Louisa, Matthias said, taking her hand. "I'm sorry about this. I really thought they would be better than this." As they were about to leave the room, Carlos's voice stopped them. "Wait, son." Matthias turned, still furious but willing to listen. Carlos stood up slowly, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. I apologize for our behavior," Carlos said, his voice strained. "We were raised a certain way, but that's no excuse for treating someone like this." Helena, still shocked by her son's outburst, also spoke up. "Yes, we behaved terribly. Louisa, please forgive us." Louisa, with a grace that surprised everyone, smiled gently. "It's all right. I understand that first impressions aren't always the best. Perhaps we can start over." The tension in the room began to dissipate. Matthias, still holding Louisa's hand, felt a wave of pride and admiration for her. How could someone be so understanding after being treated that way? The four sat down again, and this time the conversation flowed more naturally. Louisa spoke about her passion for art, and even Carlos, usually so reserved, became animated when he discovered they shared an interest in Renaissance painters. When they finally left the mansion late that night, Matthias felt emotionally exhausted but strangely light. "You were incredible in there," he told Louisa as he drove back to the city. "I don't know if I would have been so understanding in your place." Louisa smiled, her eyes shining in the light from the car's dashboard. Sometimes the best way to change people is by showing them a kindness they don't expect. Matthias fell silent for a moment, reflecting on her words. "You know," he said finally, "I think I've learned more about life and values in these few weeks with you than in all my previous years." Louisa blushed, but her smile widened. "Well, maybe we can keep learning together." At that moment, Matthias knew his life had changed forever. The challenge that had started as a joke had transformed into something much greater, something he could barely begin to comprehend. The city lights twinkled below as Matthias and Louisa stood on the balcony of his penthouse. The air was thick with anticipation, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Louisa took a deep breath, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her blouse. "Matthias, there's something I need to tell you, something that might change everything between us." Matthias felt his heart race. He reached out, gently taking her hands in his. "Whatever it is, Louisa, we'll face it together." She looked up at him, her eyes brimming with a mixture of fear and hope. "My real name," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "is Luisa Mendonça dos Santos." Matthias frowned, confused. "Dos Santos? But that's—" "Yes," Louisa nodded, "my family. Well, let's say they're not exactly what you might imagine." "What do you mean?" Louisa's voice trembled slightly as she continued. "My family owns one of the largest business conglomerates in the country. The Dos Santos fortune is. It's significantly larger than yours, Matthias." Matthias felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. "But how? Why did you never tell me?" Louisa smiled sadly. "Because that's not who I am, or at least not who I chose to be." She went on to reveal that from a young age, she had rejected the luxurious lifestyle of her family. She wanted to live a normal life, to make a difference in the world without the weight of the Dos Santos name. "My parents," she explained, "agreed to let me live my own life away from the spotlight. They understood my desire to be judged for who I am, not for the size of my bank account." Matthias was stunned, trying to process everything he was hearing. "But your weight, your appearance—" Louisa smiled, a little embarrassed. "Partly genetics, partly choice. You see, when you're a multi-millionaire heiress, people tend to approach you out of interest. My appearance, well, it functions as a very effective filter." Matthias stood in silence for a long moment, absorbing everything he had heard. Finally he spoke. "So all this time you knew who I was, about my wealth?" Louisa nodded. "Yes, I knew. But that didn't matter to me, Matthias. What mattered was who you were on the inside, and over these weeks, I've seen you change, become someone more compassionate, more open." Matthias felt a wave of emotions hit him: shame for his initial prejudices, admiration for Louisa's strength, and a growing certainty that he was falling in love with her. "Louisa," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion, I don't know what to say except that I'm glad I met you. The real you." She smiled, tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. "Me too, Matthias. Me too." In that moment, under the starlit sky of Sao Paulo, Matthias and Louisa shared their first kiss. It was a kiss that sealed not just a budding love, but a profound transformation in both of them. As they parted, Matthias couldn't help but chuckle. "You know, when Ricardo challenged me to marry an obese woman for a day, I never imagined it would lead to this." Louisa laughed, the sound light and joyous. "Life has a funny way of surprising us, doesn't it? Sometimes the things we least expect turn out to be exactly what we need." Matthias pulled her close, marveling at the twists and turns that had brought them to this moment. He realized that in trying to prove that money could buy anything, he had found something priceless, a love that saw beyond appearances, beyond wealth, to the very core of who they were. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Matthias knew that his journey of transformation was far from over. But with Louisa by his side, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The months that followed Louisa's revelation were a whirlwind of love, growth and discovery for both Matthias and Louisa. Their relationship deepened, each day bringing new insights and shared experiences that bound them closer together. On a crisp autumn evening, as they strolled through the Ibirapura Park, the place where they had first truly connected, Matthias suddenly dropped to one knee. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, casting a warm glow on Louisa's surprised face. "Luisa Mendonça dos Santos," Matthias began, his voice trembling slightly, "you've shown me a world I never knew existed. A world where love isn't measured by appearance or wealth, but by the depth of one's heart. Will you marry me?" Tears glistened in Louisa's eyes as she nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. As Matthias slipped a simple yet elegant ring on her finger, she finally found her voice. Yes, Matthias, 1,000 times yes. Their wedding, held a few months later, was an intimate affair, a stark contrast to the lavish society weddings both families were accustomed to. Held in a small, picturesque chapel on the outskirts of Sao Paulo, the ceremony was attended only by close family and friends. Luisa wore a simple yet elegant dress, her beauty radiating from within. As she walked down the aisle, Matthias couldn't take his eyes off her, marveling at how this woman had completely transformed his life. The reception was held in the garden of the Alves family mansion, now a symbol not of exclusivity and wealth, but of unity and new beginnings. Carlos and Helena Alves, once skeptical of Luisa, now embraced her warmly as their daughter-in-law. The Dos Santos family, initially wary of Matthias's reputation, were won over by his evident love for Luisa and his changed perspective on life. As they danced under the starlit sky, surrounded by the gentle glow of fairy lights, Matthias whispered to Luisa, "I never knew I could be this happy. You've given me more than I ever dreamed possible." Luisa's eyes sparkled as she replied, "This is just the beginning, my love. Together we can make a real difference in the world." And make a difference they did. In the weeks and months that followed their wedding, Matthias and Luisa combined their considerable resources and influence to launch a series of philanthropic initiatives that would change countless lives. They established the Alves dos Santos Foundation, focusing on education, healthcare, and environmental conservation. Matthias, once obsessed with profit margins, now found himself poring over plans for schools in underprivileged areas and sustainable housing projects. Luisa, no longer hiding behind her appearance, became a vocal advocate for body positivity and mental health awareness. She used her art history background to launch programs bringing art education to underfunded schools, believing in the power of creativity to transform lives. Their work didn't come without challenges. Some in their social circles scoffed at their efforts, seeing them as naive or misguided. There were times when the enormity of the problems they faced seemed overwhelming. But in those moments they found strength in each other. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of meetings and site visits, Matthias found Luisa on their balcony, gazing out at the city lights. He wrapped his arms around her, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Tough day?" he asked softly. Luisa leaned back into his embrace. "Sometimes I wonder if we're really making a difference. There's so much need out there, so much to be done." Matthias turned her gently to face him. "Look at me, Luisa. Every life we touch, every child we help educate, every family we provide a home for, that's a difference. We may not be able to change the whole world, but we're changing someone's world every day." Luisa's eyes welled up with tears, but she smiled. "When did you become so wise, Mr. Alves?" Matthias chuckled, kissing her forehead. "I had an excellent teacher, Mrs. Alves dos Santos." As they stood there, overlooking the city they were working tirelessly to improve, both Matthias and Luisa reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. From a ridiculous challenge born of arrogance to a partnership founded on love and shared purpose, their story was a testament to the transformative power of genuine connection. They knew that challenges lay ahead. The work they had undertaken was not easy, and there would be setbacks and disappointments. But as they held each other close, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky, Matthias and Luisa were filled with hope and determination. Together, they were ready to face whatever the future might bring, knowing that their love and shared vision could overcome any obstacle. Little did they know that their greatest challenge was yet to come, one that would test the very foundations of their love and the strength of their commitment to each other and their shared dreams. As the golden rays of the setting sun painted the Sao Paulo skyline, Matthias and Luisa stood hand in hand on their penthouse balcony, their silhouettes a picture of contentment and love. Little did they know that the approaching twilight would herald the darkest chapter of their lives. You, dear reader, might feel a chill run down your spine, sensing that the harmony of their world is about to be shattered. It began with small, almost imperceptible changes. Luisa found herself tiring more easily, her usually boundless energy waning. At first they attributed it to the stress of managing their foundation and the countless projects they had undertaken. But as the days passed, a gnawing worry began to take root in Matthias's heart. "Louisa, my love," he said one evening, his voice laced with concern, "I think we should see a doctor. You haven't been yourself lately." Louisa tried to brush off his worries with a smile, but even she couldn't deny the persistent fatigue and the dull ache that seemed to have taken up residence in her body. "Perhaps you're right," she conceded. "It's probably nothing, but it wouldn't hurt to check." You might find yourself holding your breath, a sense of foreboding settling in your chest as you anticipate what's to come. The sterile walls of the hospital seemed to close in around them as they waited for the results of Louisa's tests. The ticking of the clock echoed loudly in the silent room, each second stretching into an eternity. When the doctor finally entered, his grave expression sent a jolt of fear through Matthias. "Mr. and Mrs. Alves dos Santos," the doctor began, his voice somber, "I'm afraid I have some difficult news." The world seemed to tilt on its axis as the doctor's words washed over them. Louisa had a rare and aggressive form of cancer. The prognosis was grim. The doctors gave her 2 years at most. You might feel a lump forming in your throat, your heart aching for Matthias and Louisa as their perfect world crumbles around them. Matthias felt as if he had been plunged into icy water, his breath caught in his throat. He gripped Louisa's hand tightly, as if he could anchor her to this world through sheer force of will. Louisa, her face pale but composed, asked in a steady voice, "What are our options, doctor?" The following weeks were a blur of specialists, experimental treatments, and late-night research sessions. Matthias threw himself into finding a cure with the same intensity he had once applied to making money. He consulted the best doctors from around the world, funded promising studies, and explored every possible avenue of treatment. Louisa, on the other hand, faced her diagnosis with a courage and serenity that left everyone around her in awe. Matthias. She said one night, as they lay in bed, the soft glow of the moon filtering through the windows, "We can't let this disease define us. We have to keep living, keep loving, keep making a difference." You might find yourself marveling at Louisa's strength, even as your heart breaks for the challenges they face. Despite the battle against time, the couple strived to make the most of every moment together. They traveled to places Louisa had always dreamed of seeing, created precious memories, and continued their philanthropic work with even greater fervor. As Louisa's health deteriorated, Matthias became increasingly desperate. He offered fortunes to scientists, pleaded with doctors, even explored controversial alternative treatments, but nothing seemed capable of halting the relentless advance of the disease. It was on an autumn afternoon, as they watched the sunset from the balcony of their home, that Louisa finally confronted Matthias about his obsession with saving her. "My love," she said softly, holding his hand, "you need to accept that some things are beyond our control." Matthias felt tears burn in his eyes. "I can't give up, Louisa. I can't lose you." She smiled, that smile that always warmed his heart. "You'll never lose me, Matthias. What we have, the love we share, that's eternal. It's bigger than life, bigger than death." You might find yourself reaching for a tissue, moved by the depth of their love in the face of such adversity. That night, as Louisa slept, Matthias reflected on everything they had lived through together. He thought of the ridiculous challenge that had led him to meet her, the transformation she had sparked in him, the deep and true love they had built. In the days that followed, Matthias began to reluctantly accept the inevitability of what was to come. Instead of spending energy on impossible cures, he dedicated himself to making Louisa's last days as happy as possible. They spent hours talking, reminiscing about happy moments, making plans for a future, not a future they would live together, but a future Matthias would build based on the values and dreams Louisa had taught him to cherish. As the leaves began to turn golden outside their window, Matthias held Louisa close, his heart both heavy with sorrow and light with love. "You've given me a lifetime in these few years, my love," he whispered. Louisa's eyes, though tired, still sparkled with the same intensity as the day they met. "And you've given me a reason to believe in miracles, Matthias. Promise me you'll keep believing, keep loving, keep making the world a little better every day." With tears in his eyes, Matthias made the promise, sealing it with a gentle kiss. As this chapter comes to a close, you might find yourself both dreading and eagerly anticipating what comes next, your heart fully invested in the journey of Matthias and Louisa. The autumn leaves rustled gently outside the window of Matthias and Louisa's bedroom. Louisa, noticeably weaker but with eyes still bright with determination, called Matthias to her side. Her voice, though soft, carried an urgency that made Matthias's heart race. "Matthias," she began, her voice slightly trembling, "there's something I need to tell you. Something that not even my family knows." Matthias sat on the edge of the bed, taking her hand in his. "What is it, my love?" Louisa took a deep breath before continuing. "Do you remember when I told you about my family, about our wealth?" Matthias nodded, confusion etched on his face. "Well," she proceeded, "there's something I didn't tell you. When I decided to live away from the world of the rich, I didn't just distance myself. I created a secret fund." Matthias frowned, not fully understanding. "A secret fund?" Louisa nodded. "Over the years, I diverted a significant portion of my family's fortune into this fund. Billions of reals, in fact, all stored secretly, away from everyone's eyes." The millionaire was astounded, trying to process what he had just heard. "But why?" "I wanted to make a difference," Louisa explained, her eyes shining with determination. "Not just small donations here and there, but something truly transformative. And now, Matthias, I want you to be the guardian of this fund." Matthias was speechless, trying to grasp the magnitude of what Louisa was entrusting to him. I don't understand. Why are you telling me this now?" Louisa squeezed his hand with what strength she had left. "Because I know my time is running out, my love. And I want to make sure that this money will be used to do good, to continue the work we started together." She explained that the fund was set up in a way that would allow Matthias to use it for large-scale philanthropic projects without drawing attention to the source of the money. "You've become a different man, Matthias," she said with a smile. "A man who understands the value of helping others, of making a difference in the world. I trust you to use this money wisely." Matthias felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. It was an immense trust that Louisa was placing in him. "I promise," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise I'll honor your legacy, Louisa." In the days that followed, Louisa shared all the details about the secret fund. She also shared her ideas and dreams for future projects, from building schools in underprivileged areas to funding innovative medical research. As Louisa's health rapidly deteriorated, Matthias remained by her side constantly. They spent hours talking, laughing about happy memories, and making plans for a future that Louisa wouldn't see but had helped shape. On the night before their second wedding anniversary, Louisa asked to be taken to the balcony. She wanted to see the stars one last time. Matthias gently carried her, wrapping her in warm blankets as they gazed at the night sky. "You know, Matthias," Louisa spoke softly, "when we met I thought I was teaching you about life. But the truth is I learned as much from you as you did from me." Matthias kissed her forehead gently. "You taught me to be a better person, Louisa. You changed my life in a way I never imagined possible." Louisa smiled, her eyes reflecting the stars above. "Promise me one thing, my love. Promise that you'll continue to grow, to learn, to make a difference. Don't let my passing stop you from living fully." With tears in his eyes, Matthias made the promise. They stayed there, embraced under the starry sky, until Louisa peacefully fell asleep in his arms. As Matthias held her, he felt the enormity of the task ahead of him. But with Louisa's love and trust as his guiding light, he knew he would find the strength to carry on her legacy and continue making the world a better place. The morning of their second wedding anniversary dawned with a bittersweet stillness. Matthias awoke to find that Louisa had peacefully slipped away during the night, a serene smile gracing her face. Now, I know what you're thinking, dear viewer. Oh no, not another sad ending, but hang on to your tissues, folks. This story is far from over, and if you stick around, I promise there's a plot twist coming that'll knock your socks off. So why not hit that subscribe button now? You know you want to. The days that followed were a blur of grief and arrangements. The funeral was a celebration of Louisa's life, with hundreds of lives she had touched coming to pay their respects. Matthias stood stoically, receiving condolences from friends, family, and beneficiaries of their foundation's work. As he listened to story after story of Louisa's kindness and impact, Matthias couldn't help but marvel at the legacy she had left behind. She turned this arrogant millionaire into a philanthropist he mused to himself. Talk about an extreme makeover, life edition. Folks, If Louisa could transform a guy who once thought charity was just a fancy name for a debutante, there's hope for us all. Remember to like and subscribe for more life-changing content. In the weeks that followed, as the acute pain of loss began to give way to a constant ache of absence, Matthias found himself confronted with the task of fulfilling the promise he had made to Louisa. He immersed himself in philanthropic work, using Louisa's secret fund to initiate ambitious projects. Schools were built in underprivileged communities, equipped with state-of-the-art technology. Microcredit programs helped small entrepreneurs realize their dreams. Matthias became known as one of the country's greatest philanthropists, though few knew the true extent of his work or the source of the resources. One day, as Matthias was reviewing plans for a new sustainable housing project, he caught his reflection in the window. Gone was the arrogant, self-centered man he once was. In his place stood someone Louisa would have been proud of. He smiled, thinking of how she would have teased him about his newfound passion for solar panels and rainwater harvesting systems. Who knew saving the world could be so nerdy he could almost hear her say. Hey viewers, if you're enjoying this rags to riches to righteousness story, don't forget to smash that like button. And if you're feeling inspired to start your own philanthropic journey, remember every little bit counts. Even if it's just helping your neighbor carry their groceries, though $1 billion secret fund wouldn't hurt. As night fell, Matthias stood on the balcony where he and Louisa had shared so many moments. He looked up at the stars, feeling a connection to her that transcended life and death. I'm doing it, Louisa, he whispered to the night sky. I'm living the life we dreamed of. I'm making a difference. And as a warm breeze caressed his face, Matthias could almost swear he heard Louisa's laughter on the wind, encouraging him onward in his journey of love, growth, and generosity. Stay tuned, dear viewers, for the next chapter in Matthias's journey. Will he continue on this path of righteousness? Will he face new challenges? Will he ever learn to cook something other than instant noodles? Subscribe now to find out. Years passed, and Louisa's influence continued to spread through Matthias's actions. The once arrogant millionaire had become a beacon of hope and change in Sao Paulo and beyond. The secret fund Louisa had entrusted to him became the catalyst for transformative projects that touched countless lives. In the heart of Sao Paulo's most impoverished neighborhood, a state-of-the-art school rose from the ashes of abandoned buildings. Children who once had no hope of education now walked through its doors daily, their eyes bright with the promise of a better future. Matthias often visited, watching from the shadows as laughter echoed through halls adorned with vibrant murals, each one a tribute to Louisa's love for art. Mr. Alves, a young girl, approached him one day, her smile missing a few teeth. Is it true that an angel helped you build this school? Matthias knelt down, his eyes misting slightly. Yes, it's true. The kindest, most beautiful angel you could imagine. In the Amazon rainforest, a cutting-edge research facility dedicated to preserving biodiversity and developing sustainable practices stood as a testament to Louisa's passion for environmental conservation. Scientists from around the world gathered there, working tirelessly to protect the lungs of the earth. During a particularly challenging period when loggers threatened the project, Matthias found himself standing at the edge of the rainforest, the humid air thick around him. He closed his eyes, remembering Louisa's words sometimes, the things most worth fighting for are the ones that seem impossible. With renewed determination, he negotiated with local communities, offering alternative livelihoods and education. Slowly but surely the threat receded, and the forest continued to thrive. In hospitals across the country, new wings dedicated to rare disease research bore Louisa's name. Matthias poured resources into finding cures for illnesses like the one that had taken his beloved wife. Though he knew it was too late for Louisa, the thought of sparing others from similar pain drove him forward. One afternoon, as he toured a newly opened facility, a doctor approached him with tears in her eyes. Mr. Alves, the treatment we developed here just saved a young woman with the same condition your wife had. She has a chance at life now, all thanks to your support. Matthias felt a wave of emotions wash over him: joy, sorrow, and a profound sense of purpose. He looked up, imagining Louisa smiling down at him. "We did it, my love," he whispered. As his philanthropy grew, so did public curiosity about the source of his seemingly endless resources. Matthias walked a fine line, honoring Louisa's wish for discretion, while still inspiring others to give back. he became known as the silent benefactor, a moniker that would have amused Louisa to no end. On quiet evenings, Matthias would retreat to their old penthouse, now converted into a small art gallery showcasing up-and-coming artists, another nod to Louisa's passions. He'd stand on the balcony, looking out over the city they'd both loved, marveling at how much had changed. "I never thought I'd say this," he mused aloud, imagining Louisa beside him, "but I think I'm making more of a difference now than I ever did as a cutthroat businessman." He could almost hear her laughter on the wind, could almost feel her hand in his. The pain of her loss never fully disappeared, but it had transformed into a driving force, pushing him to be better, to do more, to love more deeply. As he approached his 60th birthday, Matthias began to think about the future. He had never remarried, choosing instead to dedicate his life to honoring Louisa's legacy. But he knew that for their work to continue, he needed to prepare the next generation. He established the Luisa Alves dos Santos Foundation, ensuring that their shared vision of a more equitable, compassionate world would live on long after he was gone. He began mentoring young philanthropists, sharing not just the practical aspects of charitable work, but the heart behind it, the lessons in love and compassion that Louisa had taught him. One evening, as he watched the sun set over Sao Paulo from his office in the foundation's headquarters, Matthias reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From an arrogant millionaire focused only on his own wealth, to a man dedicated to improving the lives of others, it was a transformation he never could have imagined. "Louisa," he said softly to the fading light, "I hope I've made you proud. Your love didn't just change my life, it's changing the world." As darkness fell over the city, the lights of the many projects and institutions bearing Louisa's name twinkled like stars, a fitting tribute to the woman whose love had sparked a revolution of kindness. And in that moment, Matthias knew that their story, a story of love, transformation, and enduring legacy, was far from over. In fact, in many ways, it was just beginning. On his 60th birthday, Matthias Alves made a decision that would once again change the course of his life. He gathered a select group of trusted journalists and, for the first time, shared the complete story of his transformation. Folks, if you've been touched by Matthias and Louisa's journey so far, make sure to hit that like button. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this finale. Matthias recounted everything: the initial challenge, his meeting with Louisa, the profound change he had sparked in him, and the secret fund that had been changing lives for decades. As he spoke, the journalists sat in rapt attention, their pens flying across notepads, capturing a love story that was also a story of redemption, personal growth, and the transformative power of generosity. The story captured the public's imagination like wildfire. It wasn't just a tale of love, but a beacon of hope in a world that often seemed dark and selfish. Matthias used the newfound attention to inspire others to make a difference, no matter how small their contribution might seem. Louisa taught me, he often said in interviews, that true wealth isn't in what we possess, but in the positive impact we have on the lives of others. If Matthias's words are inspiring you to make a change in your community, why not share your ideas in the comments? Let's spread some positivity. As he aged, Matthias began preparing the next generation to continue the work. The Luisa Alves dos Santos Foundation became a training ground for young philanthropists, ensuring that the legacy of love and compassion would continue far beyond his own lifetime. In his final years, Matthias often found himself gazing at the starry sky, remembering that last night with Louisa on their balcony. He felt a sense of peace, knowing he had fulfilled his promise to her, he had lived a life that would make her proud. On the night of his 85th birthday, Matthias went to sleep with a smile on his face, feeling at peace. He dreamed of Louisa, young and radiant as on the day they met, extending her hand to him, her eyes shining with love and pride. Matthias Alves passed away peacefully in his sleep. The news of his death was met with sadness across the country, but also with a profound gratitude for the impact he and Louisa had had on countless lives. His funeral was a celebration of a life well lived, a life transformed by the power of love and compassion. People didn't just mourn the loss of a great philanthropist, but the conclusion of a love story that had inspired millions. The legacy of Matthias and Louisa continued to live on through the foundation they had established, through the lives they had transformed, and through the inspiration their story continued to provide. What had begun as an arrogant challenge ended as a powerful lesson about love, acceptance, and the true meaning of wealth. As the sun set on the day of Mateus's funeral, a young girl in a school built by the Alves dos Santos Foundation looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Mateus and Miss Lisa. Louisa, I'll make you proud." And so, dear viewers, ends the tale of Mateus and Louisa, a reminder that love has the power to transform not just individuals, but the entire world. If this story has touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content. Share your thoughts in the comments. How has this story impacted you? And remember, in the words of Mateus Alves, every act of kindness, no matter how small, has the power to change a life. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. Until next time, keep loving, keep growing, and keep making a difference.